The aces have cabin fever, and they're all getting mad.
How you get so big into food of this kind?
Hello, and welcome into this week's spoiler review of Star Wars Resistance. Today the episode is the Voxx Vortex 5000, and no, that is not a vacuum cleaner, it is a race. As I said, this is going to be a spoiler review, so spoilers start here. But this episode finds us on the Colossus. The aces are getting a little bit stir-crazy. They've not gotten a lot to do. The Colossus, thankfully, has been able to avoid First Order detection for some time. Even though we saw the First Order last week, that was largely due to Tora's mother being captured and not because the Colossus itself remained in danger. They were only found because of the beacon they let off. So this week returns us to our heroes trying to get all of the supplies they need in order to survive. This week, they are short on money. Of course, they've been trying to buy things here and there, but they really don't have a lot in the way of funds. So Hype has this idea of how he can make everybody happy, especially Hype. Hype remembers his buddy who runs a casino and is like, hey, we can go there. The aces can do what we do best and race. We can make some money, we can have some cash, and it will help us in our endeavor to stay away from the First Order and find some place to find shelter and find a way to talk to whoever we need to talk to and so on and so forth. The rest of the episode is that not going according to plan as they have to find their way out of the clutches of a terrible frenemy. Before we talk about the story itself, I want to talk about something that got a shout out in the episode. The character of Vrenki the Hutt, Vrenki the Blue, mentions that his business has been tanking since everybody has gone to Canto Bight because the war started. This tells us a couple of different things. One, it's a cool shout out to Canto Bight. We are set around the time of The Last Jedi, though I suspect we are set after the time of The Last Jedi. Part of what makes me think that, besides the fact that there's just not that many days over the course of that film, is the start of the war. Generally speaking, in this sequel trilogy era, this Age of Resistance, the war doesn't start until The Force Awakens. Yes, we see the Resistance. Yes, they are a military force. Yes, the First Order has a military, and the Resistance, may have been chipping away at the First Order here or there. But really, it's something of a Cold War. The New Republic is not actually in open war with the First Order, and the First Order blowing up Hosnian Prime is the opening salvo to the war itself. Of course, the destruction of Hosnian means that there is no New Republic military, so the Resistance, which has always been kind of a ancillary group to the New Republic, steps in and the war officially begins. If the war starts at the Season 1 finale, by the time we get here in the show, enough time must have passed for people to stop being patrons of Vrenki's casino and have moved to Canto Bight. Though there is also the possibility that Vrenki is just lying and trying to save face in front of Hype, though the tone in his voice doesn't make me think that that's what's going on here. Another thing that's kind of interesting about that comment is why would they go to Canto Bight? Why is Canto Bight so much better than a Hutt's casino? Is it their location in space? Is it that Cantonica, the planet that the casino of Canto Bight, the city of Canto Bight is on, is in a safer space? Or is it something else? If you think back to The Last Jedi, there are many reasons why Rose says Canto Bight is kind of the worst place of the worst. Part of it is you find out that they only get rich there because they sell weapons of war. And you're led to believe that this is First Order stuff. Then you have DJ come in and say, actually, let me show you something big. And it's that both the First Order and the New Republic / Resistance is buying off of the people of Canto Bight and making them rich and feeding the war machine. And this is DJ's effort of convincing to Finn, don't join. Everybody's kind of a bad guy. But it makes me think that maybe people think Canto Bight is going to be a safe place because both sides need it. I think a little bit of the planet of Manon from Knights of the Old Republic, if you've ever played that game, that planet was able to maintain its neutrality because it was the only planet that sold a valuable healing resource. As such, both armies in the war needed to buy from it, and so neither could attack it. Of course, that doesn't necessarily go the way they think it's going to go in that game, but that's besides the point. I think it's possible that maybe Canto Bight is more of a neutral ground if both forces need the planet. That's a whole lot about Canto Bight and not a whole lot about this episode, but it was a lot of universe building in one sentence, or at least potential universe building in one sentence, that got me really excited and had me kind of thinking about why would somebody go there versus a Hutt who would be presumably very neutral in this war. Frankie might have the neutrality, but he might not have the security where neither forces are really going to want to disrupt what's going on Canto Bight, like they might at Frankie's Casino. But now let's get to the episode itself. Unsurprisingly, Hype finds himself in a situation where he's probably in a little bit over his head, but he's Hype and he doesn't realize it. He bets his life of service, his life as a racer, to Frankie in return for some credits so that the Colossus can actually have some credits. Hype is spoiling for a race, and he knows this course like the back of his hand, so he is very confident he can win. And he almost does. He almost beats the racer that he's up against until the racer cheats. It turns out that it's a droid. It's a model that looks almost like a Vulture droid like we saw in the prequel trilogy, but souped up for racing. I don't know if it's a modified member of that droid model, or if it's kind of like the same line, but made for a different purpose, but it doesn't really matter. The droid hops on Hype's ship, and then uses his ship as a launching point to jump through the hoop itself, and Hype loses. Hype is mad because he didn't realize he was up against a droid racer, which would change things. It shows that Frankie is not all on the up and up. Now, it kind of calls into question Hype's relationship with Frankie. When he's talking to Doza, he's like, dude, this is my friend, and he's gonna hook us up with a race, and it's gonna be great and awesome. And then we get there, and when Hype is making the initial bet, he's like, hey, hold on, this isn't like before. I don't want to get caught up in your gambling schemes. So he knows that Frankie is capable of being up to no good. The implication, to me at least, is that Hype left him because Frankie was up to no good, and Hype didn't want to be up to no good. So that brings into question, why would Hype really talk Frankie up, but then be so mistrustful of him? It felt a little bit like Han and Lando, like, of course I don't trust him, but he is my friend, kind of a thing. I think that Hype just really needed a race. He probably missed a little bit of his old life, now that his current life is really kind of being stirred up and changed. He would know the race, he'd be confident he could make some money. Unfortunately, Frankie has some tricks up his sleeve. It's around the same time that we see Niku messing with a video game. It's kind of fun to see Niku playing these video games, especially when he's talking to Kaz and Tora about it, and talking about how the game's algorithm is messed up so you can't really win it. I don't know that I would have pegged Niku as the gamer, especially when we saw Kaz and Tora and Tam and Sonara all playing a game in the first season, and I don't believe Niku was involved with that. But it also makes sense that Niku would be a gamer, or at least a specific type of gamer, somebody who might be more into a strategy tactics kind of thing. And so seeing him being instantly pulled into the game, and just his line of like, oh, the gameplay is great, and it's pretty, like just so many fun little Niku moments as he's examining that. I like that it's Hype that figures out that the game could be connected to the droids. Hype is always played up as this hype guy, right? He's so into himself. He doesn't think through everything because he's so into himself. But I liked him, like seeing him think for a second and coming up with a way to dig himself out of his own problems, even though he needs his friends to help him. It's always nice to see the character who seems like they're superficially one thing, to see them actually have more going on with them. And I think that moment there is enough to show that Hype is actually intelligent. He just has a big ego. Niku says the plan can work, but it's going to take a little while to figure it out, and take a little while to figure out it does. The other aces try their best against the robot pilots. Freya goes, Griff goes, Bo Keevil goes, and their races do not come out for the better for the Colossus. One by one, each one of them falls to some form of cheating from Frankie's part, either claiming that there would be no weapons, and there were, or obstacles that were unaccounted for. Basically, Frankie is making sure he wins, and there's very little the folks from the Colossus can do. They can call him out on his crap, but he's not necessarily going to listen to them. That's when we get to Kaz and Tora. They set up a relay race, so it's going to be both of them. Tora gets shot down, basically, but she survives. And then it's up to Kaz to make up her slack that was unfairly put upon her, and then gain and actually win the race. I love it anytime we see Kaz flying, because that is what Kaz is good at. Kaz is not good at spying. Kaz is not good at fixing things. He's learning and he's gotten better, but like, he really is a competent pilot. I mean, Poe Dameron picked him out of a crowd for a reason. It's nice to see him really in his element, really succeeding in what he does. We have that tension where he's trying to talk to Niku, but of course Niku's been pulled away by the Kowakian monkey lizards. It sets up this idea of, oh man, what's gonna happen? Is everybody gonna get, taken in by this hut? Are they gonna have to find their way out a different way? And the overall structure was very good. It followed a very nice kind of step ladder of tension as the episode went on. Of course, in his own race, Kaz cheats a little bit. He goes off the beaten track within the race, but surprisingly, Frankie, when he gets called on this, is like, hey, I thought you said anything goes, lets it slide. He's not happy about it, but he lets it go. Frankie is an interesting character because he's unscrupulous, he cheats, he's going to manipulate a friend in hype to try to get him to work for him, but at the same time, business is business, and that's kind of an interesting thing to see. This did not need to become a thing where we were getting in a big gunfight, even though there was some shooting going on. You can kind of see that Frankie is really just greedy more than he is evil. The episode also kind of brings in something odd, in that this is an episode about gambling. Doza agrees to go, knowing that it's going to be gambling. Yeager kind of goes along with it. He gets really frustrated when he doesn't realize that Doza is on Niku's plan and calms down about it. But this is definitely an episode that kind of teaches you, if you want to gamble, the house is always going to win. To the extent that they're able to kind of cheat the house through Niku taking care of the algorithm and Kaz kind of doing his own thing, they're ultimately able to win, but it's interesting to see gambling portrayed in this way. I mean, it's big stakes. It's not just money, something that younger viewers might not understand. It is Kaz and friends almost in some sort of personal peril. But it's been kind of an odd list of topics this season. We've dealt with hunting, we've dealt with planetary drilling, we now have gambling. It's almost like this weird list of morals that often pops up in Star Wars, and we're kind of just taking it on either like a slightly different take or finding a way to overcome it. But this certainly isn't the first time we've seen gambling in the show. I mean, you go back to the first season, there were some comedic bits where Kaz is jumping around outside of a building and Antsy is like taking bets on how Kaz is going to do. We've seen racing before. I mean, these guys are racers. There's going to be gambling involved. There's going to be money involved. A lot of the Colossus's economy was built on some form of gambling. It would have had to have been. So we see Doza being very clear, like, this is a way that we can come up with income. It was interesting to see, and it was nice to see the Aces kind of in their element. This is the type of episode that I really thought the show was going to be more about from the beginning, before we saw just what it became by the end of the first season. Two little fun notes. I loved the rage faces in this episode. Yeager had a particularly great upset face. Freya had a particularly great upset face. They're really doing a good job with animating character expressions within the show. And another thing the show did is one of my favorite things the show does, where it has like the random side character. You take somebody like Obi-Pit, who's kind of won the hearts of fans, but so often you have these side characters that kind of have their own little mini arc. Arc isn't really the right word, but like you see them and eventually you have some sort of payoff. So you have the one lady at the end of the episode who like wins on the slot machine after we'd seen her sitting there being like the only other patron at this place, who is seemingly uninterested in the races. So that was fun. And then just as a side character, I really liked the race announcer too. He was just so darn excited for absolutely anything that happened. So it was a lot of the small details that this show is best at. But those are my thoughts on this episode this week. This was definitely let's spend time getting to know the characters. Let's spend time with the Aces, seeing what the Aces can do before the season is done, as opposed to the big galactic story of the First Order and the Resistance. This was still in the realm of what is the Colossus up to and how is the Colossus surviving. So we're kind of back to the small scale plotline as opposed to taking in the larger Star Wars plotline of the Age of Resistance versus just Star Wars Resistance. But let me know what you thought about it in the comments. If you're not already, please follow us on the various socials. We love chatting with you guys. And until next time, keep it real. Fly casual.
Cooking can be fun.